Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really getting into something pivotal. We're undertaking a critical analysis of Matthew chapter 26.
That's right. It's one of the most concentrated narratives, really.
Absolutely. It's like the ultimate final countdown, isn't it?
Right.
Documenting those last, really intense hours of Jesus' freedom, charting the path right to his passion.
And what makes it so potent, I think, is the stark contrast you see playing out.
Exactly. You've got this absolute divine certainty, running head-to-head with profound human failure, political maneuvering, all of it.
It's a phenomenal section. It really serves as the hinge point between Jesus's public ministry and, well, the execution of his ultimate mission.
So we're examining Matthew chapter 26 in detail. We're treating the biblical references here as a kind of structured teaching.
Right, and our objective isn't just to recount the history, is it? It's more to isolate the specific events, the scriptural details that give us, lasting insight.
Helping you understand the sheer magnitude of the decisions being made both in heaven and on earth. So our mission today is to extract those key teachings and practical insights. We'll follow the narrative structure pretty closely. Let's jump straight in then. Act 1, the clash of timings.
Sounds good. This is where we see the divine schedule set right against the panicked human plot.
Okay, so Matthew kicks this off. How does he signal we're entering this final phase?
Well, Matthew uses this literary device he often employs. It signals the end of a major section.
Ah, right. Like closing a chapter.
Precisely. In this case, it's the conclusion of the last of Jesus's 5 great public teaching discourses. So the teaching's done, now the focus shifts entirely to fulfillment.
And that's exactly what we see in these first verses, isn't it?
It is. What's fascinating is that Jesus initiates this conversation about his death. It's not presented as some sudden, unpredictable event.
No, it feels like he's laying out a known part of a fixed calendar.
Yeah.
He's controlling the narrative, even now.
Completely. The announcement in Matthew 26, verses 1 and 2, is unambiguous. It's proactive. It says, "And it came about when Jesus finished all these words, he said to his disciples, 'You know that after 2 days is the Passover, and the Son of Man will be handed over to be crucified.'"
Wow. So he gives them the specific timeline, 2 days. That puts this conversation, what, Tuesday or Wednesday maybe?
Likely, yeah. Which sets up the crucifixion for Friday the 15th of Nisan, the day of the Passover feast itself.
Okay, so the choice of Passover isn't just incidental timing. It's theological staging, right? Why is it so crucial that his death happens during the feast?
That's a great question.
Couldn't that massive influx of pilgrims, have made things too unstable, risked a chaotic end instead of a planned sacrificial one?
You're hitting on the very thing Caiaphas and the council were worried about, that political instability. But for Jesus, the timing was absolutely indispensable.
Why indispensable?
Because it assigns his death the deepest possible sacrificial significance. He fulfills the role of the ultimate Passover lamb.
Connecting back to Exodus.
Exactly. The Passover marked Israel's redemption from slavery through the blood of a sacrificed lamb. By dying precisely during that feast, Jesus permanently redefines it. His blood is linked to the new covenant, the ultimate redemption from sin.
So the theological necessity just overruled any political concerns, any logistical risks.
Completely. And notice the term he uses, Son of Man. It references his messianic, his divine authority, right in the context of his voluntary surrender. That's incredibly provocative.
Right. So while Jesus is calmly laying out this predetermined divine plan, the human element, the religious leadership they're meeting at the same time, setting their own, very different and frankly kind of chaotic itinerary.
Precisely. It's a perfect narrative contrast running in parallel. While the Son of Man prepares to be handed over, the chief priests and elders are gathering.
Where are they meeting?
At the center of political religious power, the courtyard of the high priest, Caiaphas. Matthew 26, verses 3 and 4 detail their conspiracy. Then the chief priests and the elders of the people gathered together into the courtyard of the high priest named Caiaphas, and they formed a plot that they would arrest Jesus by deceit and kill him.
Caiaphas. He was the ruling high priest for quite a while, wasn't he? Like 18 to 36.
Yeah, a long tenure. Suggests he was a shrewd political operator.
Yet here he is, gathering his council, not for justice, but for, well, strategic murder. What was driving their urgency right then?
Fundamentally, self-preservation and preserving their privileged status quo under the Romans.
They saw Jesus as a threat.
A huge populist threat, an agitator whose popularity undermined their authority, and they feared it might provoke a Roman crackdown, which would cost them everything.
So their intent was totally unrighteous, arresting him by deceit, it says.
Right, a direct contrast to Jesus's open, righteous adherence to the Father's will. They needed a quiet, discreet assassination. That just screams fear of accountability, doesn't it?
It does. And that strategic calculation, it boils down to fear of the crowds, which the next verse spells out. They're worried about crowd control during the biggest week of the year.
They state their political prudence quite explicitly, Matthew 26, verse 5. But they were saying, not during the feast, lest there be an uproar among the people.
Makes sense. Jerusalem's population would swell massively for Passover. Hundreds of thousands of pilgrims, maybe.
Easily. They feared a riot, a full-blown insurrection that would bring the Roman garrison down on them hard, especially if they touched Jesus while thousands of his Galilean followers were right there.
So their plan was
Yeah.
delay. Wait until the crowds dispersed.
And that's the profound irony of this whole first act, isn't it? Despite all their detailed, high-level political maneuvering, all their fear-driven caution,
All the conspiracy at the top.
they failed. They failed to execute their plan. Jesus' prophecy was fulfilled. He died during the feast.
Ensuring his death had exactly the sacrificial significance he intended, regardless of their logistical fears. So the practical takeaway here feels, well, deeply encouraging, actually. We need to recognize that maybe our lives aren't just subject to random political whims or, logistical headaches. If Jesus's predetermined schedule was fulfilled despite the concerted, fearful efforts of the most powerful people trying to stop it, then maybe we can trust that key events in our lives, even the really hard ones, are often part of a larger sovereign purpose.
That's a powerful thought. Human prudence, even high-level conspiracy, it just can't ultimately overturn divine destiny.
Okay, the narrative pivots sharply now, doesn't it? We shift from that cold, calculated atmosphere in Caiaphas's courtyard
To the warmth of intimate fellowship and lavish devotion. The topic moves from the price of betrayal to the cost of worship.
This shift takes us to Bethany. That's a village pretty close to Jerusalem, right? Maybe 2 miles east.
Just about.
Yeah.
And specifically to the house of Simon, who's identified as the leper.
Which probably means Simon was previously a leper, healed by Jesus, you'd assume.
That's the usual understanding, yeah. And that setting a place of restored life, of gratitude, it forms the perfect backdrop for this extraordinary act of worship. A stark contrast to the plotting back in the city.
It sets the stage for, as you said, radical devotion. While Jesus is just reclining at the table, enjoying the hospitality, this woman performs an unforgettable act.
Historically memorable, for sure.
What exactly does she do? And why is it described as so lavish? Matthew doesn't name her, but the deed itself carries huge weight.
Matthew 26, verse 7 captures the physical act. A woman came to him having an alabaster flask of very expensive perfume, which she poured up on his head while he was reclining at the table.
An alabaster flask that was often sealed, wasn't it?
Right.
Breaking it meant using the whole thing.
Right, a total expenditure. And the perfume itself, other accounts suggest it was nard, was incredibly costly.
How costly are we talking?
Think 300 denarii. That's roughly a full year's wages for a typical laborer back then.
A year's wages. Wow. Okay, so this wasn't just a small token. This was a monumental economic sacrifice. Maybe her entire inheritance or her dowry.
It could well have been. It was an act of total surrender, really, poured out in one single moment of spontaneous adoration.
And this enormous expense immediately triggers a reaction, not from outsiders, but from the inner circle of the disciples.
A highly vocal and indignant reaction, as Matthew puts it.
And their indignation, it wasn't based on simple malice, was it? It seems more like misplaced practicality, almost hyper-practicality.
That's a good way to put it. They saw a large amount of quantifiable money, and they felt its best use should be social, humanitarian, not personal and devotional.
They completely missed the immediate spiritual significance of the moment.
They did. Their complaint, which actually sounds quite virtuous on the surface, is recorded in Matthew 26, verses 8 and 9. And when his disciples saw this, they became indignant, saying, "What is the purpose of this waste? For this thing could have been sold for a high price and have been given to the poor."
They're prioritizing poverty alleviation, which is normally a righteous cause. But in these specific, unique circumstances.
They fundamentally misunderstand the hierarchy of devotion. The timing is everything here.
So if she'd done this, say, a year earlier, would their criticism have held more water? Or was it the specific context, the impending crucifixion, that made this act necessary and right, overriding all practical objections?
That's the essential pivot point. In ordinary circumstances, yeah, maybe their suggestion about the poor would be commendable, but Jesus himself confirms these were absolutely no ordinary circumstances.
He steps in.
He does. He uses his supernatural knowledge to intervene, revealing the profound prophetic meaning behind her action. And he defends her strongly.
He transforms what they call waste into a good work. How does he explain that deeper significance? How does he link her act to his mission?
Well, he clarifies the difference between his temporary physical presence and the ongoing presence of the poor. And he assigns a specific prophetic function to her action. Matthew 26, verses 10 to 12 give his defense. Quote, "And Jesus, knowing this, said to them, 'Why are you making trouble for this woman? She has worked a good work for me. For you have the poor with you always, but you do not always have me with you. For when she poured this perfume upon my body, she did it to prepare for my burial.'"
Prepare for his burial.
Huh?
Wow, so she was symbolically anointing him, like a ritual for the deceased.
Exactly. This act, done out of love and total surrender, served as a preparation for the sacrifice he was about to make just days later, something the disciples themselves were still too slow to grasp.
And Jesus doesn't just defend her action, he guarantees her lasting recognition, doesn't he?
Her reward is permanent. It's tied inextricably to the proclamation of the gospel itself. Matthew 26, verse 13 contains this prophecy of her memorial. "Truly I say to you, wherever this gospel is preached in all the world, what she has done will also be told as a memorial for her."
That's a staggering promise. It affirms that genuine, selfless devotion, even when others judge it as impractical.
It will never be forgotten. And the very fact that Matthew recorded this and that we're here discussing it millennia later
Is the direct fulfillment of Jesus' promise.
Yeah.
You know, the insight here really cuts across our modern tendency toward, well, hyper-pragmatism. The practical takeaway from Bethany seems to be this. Sometimes true devotion actually looks like sheer waste to the practical, maybe even cynical observer.
That's well put.
We're called to discern the unique spiritual requirements of a specific, maybe fleeting moment, prioritizing devotion to the Lord above all else, even when it seems economically inefficient or, managerially unsound to those around
It
us.
challenges our metrics, doesn't it?
The contrast just keeps deepening, doesn't it? We move straight from the woman's incredibly expensive, unquantifiable memorial of devotion
To Judas's transaction, which puts an exact, quantifiable, and, well, historically prophetic price on the Lord's life.
and the betrayal is made even more bitter by the source. Matthew identifies Judas specifically as one of the 12.
Yeah, that stings. This isn't an external enemy or some political adversary. This is treachery right from the inside, from one of the closest followers.
How does this grim transaction actually begin?
Judas makes this cold, calculating approach to the chief priests. He's essentially seeking compensation for his treachery. Matthew 26, verses 14 and 15 detail the arrangement. Then one of the 12, the one called Judas Iscariot, proceeded toward the chief priests and said, "What are you willing to give me if I betray him to you?" And they agreed with him for 30 pieces of silver.
30 pieces of silver. That exact number is just staggering. It might sound like a lot initially, but the specific prophetic and cultural context, it shows how cheap this betrayal really was, doesn't it?
Pathetically low, actually. The price, 30 pieces of silver, wasn't a king's ransom. It was the precise valuation given for an injured slave, according to the law of Moses, back in Exodus 21.32.
The price of a slave.
Yeah. This small sum just underscores that Judas's motivation was purely financial. It demonstrates how little he ultimately valued the Messiah, reducing the Lord of Glory to the price of common property.
He didn't betray Jesus for power or some grand philosophical victory.
No, just for meager, immediate cash.
And Matthew 26.116 notes, he immediately commits himself to finding a quiet, opportune time to hand him over, avoiding the public eye and those volatile crowds.
Right. Meanwhile, Jesus instructs his remaining faithful disciples to get ready for the Passover meal.
Okay, so Matthew 26.1719 describe that preparation. It emphasizes Jesus' foresight again, doesn't it? He sends them ahead, reveals a prearranged location.
Reinforcing that this whole sequence, despite the conspiracies swirling around, remains under his ultimate control. The meal itself happens on Thursday evening, marking the start of the traditional reckoning of the 14th of Nisan.
So they're sharing this ultimate intimate ritual, the Passover meal, and then the atmosphere just shatters, right?
Yeah.
Jesus makes a shocking disclosure.
It's a moment of extreme tension, an intense self-examination for the disciples. Matthew 26, verses 21 and 22. "And while they were eating, he said, 'Truly I say to you that one of you will betray me.' And they were exceedingly sad, and everyone began to say to him, "Surely it is not I, Lord."
Exceedingly sad. And their question, surely it is not I, Lord? The way it's phrased in Greek suggests they expected a no.
Exactly. It shows they genuinely couldn't conceive that such wickedness was sitting there among them. Their immediate self-doubt in that moment kind of speaks to the integrity of their loyalty, even if it was flawed.
And Jesus' response, how does he identify the betrayer?
Well, in contrast to their genuine shock, Jesus identifies the betrayer as one physically sharing the intimacy of the meal with him. Matthew 26, verses 23 and 24 detail this disclosure and the subsequent condemnation. And Jesus said, "The one who dipped his hand in the dish with me will betray me. The Son of Man is going just as it stands written about him. But woe to that man through whom the Son of Man is being betrayed. It would be better for him if that man had not been born."
Wow. Calling out the betrayal while simultaneously affirming the divine necessity of his mission. It's so complex, he's going just as it stands written, but the instrument of that betrayal still faces this terrible judgment.
It's heavy stuff. And here's where we see Judas's final, almost cynical act of deception. He also asks the question, but the title he uses just reveals his true spiritual distance.
Ah, right. Matthew 26.25. And Judas, the one who was betraying him, answered and said, "It is not I myself, Rabbi." Jesus said to him, "You yourself have said it."
You caught that distinction? The others addressed him as Lord, signifying their ultimate allegiance, their faith in his divine person.
But Judas calls him Rabbi, teacher, keeping that professional, formal distance even right then as he's being exposed.
It's chilling, isn't it? It perfectly encapsulates his internal state, the coldness of his heart.
So after Judas presumably leaves, the text implies he departs. The atmosphere shifts again. Jesus then transitions this ancient Passover ritual into something new.
Into the foundational ordinance of the Christian faith, the Lord's Supper, establishing the new covenant right there.
This symbolic shift is absolutely fundamental for the whole New Testament. Let's look at how he redefines the elements, starting with the bread.
Yeah, the symbolism here is incredibly profound. Starting with the bread, Matthew 26, verse 26. "And while they were eating, Jesus took the bread and after blessing it, broke it and gave it to his disciples and said, 'Take, eat, for this is my body.'"
That sequence. Taking, blessing, breaking, giving. It's deliberate, isn't it?
Very. It connects the sustenance of bread, which has to be broken and distributed, to his own body, which is about to be physically broken for their salvation.
And then the cup, often related to the third cup of the Passover Seder, the cup of blessing.
That's the common understanding. And he assigns it this radical new meaning, speaking directly to sacrificial cleansing and forgiveness.
How does he phrase that?
It's the ultimate statement of sacrificial cleansing, really replacing the old covenant rituals. Matthew 26, verses 27 and 28. "Then he took a cup, blessed it, and gave it to them, saying, 'Drink from it, all of you, for this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for the many for the forgiveness of sins.'"
Blood of the covenant. That language directly evokes the Old Testament ceremonies, like with Moses.
It does. But crucially, Jesus explicitly links his blood to the ultimate outcome, the forgiveness of sins. That's the goal the Old Covenant sacrifices could never fully achieve.
It's such a solemn moment, rooted in sacrifice and covenant. But Jesus doesn't end it there, does he? He points them forward towards a future hope.
Yeah, he transforms the grief into anticipation. This dual perspective, looking back in commemoration, looking forward in anticipation, is vital. Jesus looks ahead to his ultimate reunion with believers in Matthew 26, verse 29. "But I say to you, I shall certainly not drink from now on of the fruit of this vine until the day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom."
He promises a future glorious feast, where this solemn act will be replaced by the sheer joy of eternal celebration.
Exactly.
The section then closes pretty simply, just noting they sang hymns, likely the Hallel, the concluding Passover songs, before leaving for the Mount of Olives, Matthew 26.30.
Right, and the profound practical insight we can draw from all this is that the Lord's Supper really establishes these two essential perspectives for every believer.
Looking back, looking forward.
Precisely. It's designed to make us look backward, to remember the immense cost of Jesus' death, his sacrifice, and simultaneously to look forward, living in active anticipation of his glorious return and the full establishment of the Father's kingdom. It's like a perpetual anchor in both history and prophecy.
Okay, so they walk to the Mount of Olives, and the dynamic changes completely again. That sort of solemn, commemorative atmosphere of the Passover room is replaced by stark warnings. anticipated failure.
Yeah, Jesus doesn't pull any punches about the chaos that's about to break loose. He anticipates the scattering of his disciples, and he even grounds their collective failure in prophetic necessity.
How does he do that?
Matthew 26, verse 31 gives the general warning, and he references scripture. Then Jesus said to them, "This very night all of you will be offended because of me, for it is written, I shall strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be thoroughly scattered."
Citing Zechariah. So he's confirming their failure is actually anticipated by the prophets. It assures them this chaos, however painful, is part of the inevitable fulfillment.
Right. But even knowing this, Peter, who's always the loudest, most confident one, he immediately stands up.
And makes that fatal self-reliant vow. He just seems incapable of accepting the idea of his own weakness, doesn't he?
It's a classic example, isn't it? Overestimating your own spiritual strength. Peter's vow in Matthew 26, verse 33 is so bold, almost competitive. Peter answered and said to him, "Even if all will be offended because of you, I myself will never be offended."
He puts himself in a different class from everyone else, trusting in his own emotional commitment. Why do you think Jesus lets him make such a public, boastful declaration before just, crushing it with that precise prediction of betrayal?
That's a really interesting question. I suspect it's because the illusion of self-sufficiency had to be shattered before the real test came. Jesus needed to humble Peter right then. Not to humiliate him, maybe, but to warn him about the spiritual reality of the trial ahead.
So he gives him that devastatingly specific timeline in Matthew 26.34. Jesus said to him, "Truly I say to you that in this very night, before the rooster crows, you will deny knowing me 3 times.
The detail makes it unavoidable, personal. You can't argue with that level of prediction.
And tragically, instead of listening, being humbled, Peter just doubles down, swears his loyalty right up to death. And Matthew 26.35 says the other disciples all join in.
They collectively promise what their mortal flesh simply cannot deliver. It's heartbreaking, really.
So now they proceed to Gethsemane. The name itself means oil press, right?
Yeah, it evokes that sense of intense pressure, the crushing he's about to endure.
Jesus then isolates the depth of his coming agony. He takes only the inner core, Peter, James, and John, further into the orchard.
And the description of his suffering here, it's immense. We have to remember, this isn't just fear of physical death.
No, it's the impending reality of bearing the full weight, the full wrath of God for the sins of the world.
That's the crucial theological point. Gethsemane captures the mental and spiritual anguish of the sacrifice. Matthew 26, verses 37 and 38 describe this internal crisis. And he took Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee along with him, and he began to be sad and distressed. Then he said to them, "My soul is exceedingly sad to the point of death. Remain here and watch with me."
Exceedingly sad to the point of death. His suffering is existential, pushing him to the absolute brink.
And this profound distress leads him to the ultimate prayer of submission. It's really a model for how we should approach inevitable suffering.
How did that prayer go?
He throws himself completely on the ground, showing total vulnerability, total anguish, Matthew 26, verse 39. And when he had gone forward a short distance, he fell upon his face, praying and saying, "My Father, if it is possible, take this cup from me. Nevertheless, not as I myself will, but as you will."
The cup, symbolizing the suffering, the death, specifically enduring God's wrath.
Right. He petitions for another way, showing his genuine human desire, his aversion to the suffering. But his ultimate motivation remains absolute adherence to the Father's sovereign will. Not as I will, but as you will.
Yet, while Jesus is battling these cosmic spiritual forces, the very men he asked to simply watch with me.
They fail the basic test of physical vigilance. He comes back and finds the 3 closest disciples fast asleep.
The failure is immediate and profoundly disappointing, you have to think.
It leads Jesus to deliver this critical counsel on spiritual vigilance. It's a warning that echoes way beyond that night. Matthew 26, verses 40 and 41. And he returned to his disciples and found them sleeping, and said to Peter, "So you don't have strength to watch with me for 1 hour. Watch and pray so that you will not enter into temptation. For on the one hand, the spirit indeed is willing, but on the other hand, the flesh is weak."
That phrase, "the spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak," it just perfectly diagnoses the perpetual struggle of humanity, doesn't it? Our good intentions, our willing spirit constantly undercut by our biological, emotional, physical frailties when the pressure's on.
Precisely. And just to underscore the necessity, the finality of the Father's decision, Jesus goes back and prays the exact same prayer 3 times, Matthew 26.4244. His submission has to be absolute, has to be final.
His will is submitted. The time for action has arrived.
So he returns to the disciples that 3rd time, knowing the traitor is literally at the door. And he commands them to rise. It signifies the end of the vigil, the beginning of the fulfillment. Matthew 26.46. Rise up, let us go. Behold, the one betraying me is close.
Chilling. The practical takeaway from Gethsemane feels paramount then. We absolutely must heed Jesus' direct instruction. Watch and pray.
Peter's weakness shows that sincere intent, however strong, just isn't enough. The reality is, our willing spirit will constantly be undermined by the weakness of our flesh.
So we need persistent spiritual alertness, sustained through prayer, if we're going to successfully navigate temptation and endure hardship.
It's a lifelong lesson, isn't it?
Okay, so the moment Jesus announces the traitor's proximity, the betrayal itself begins. Matthew 26.47 describes this scene. Judas arrives,
Identified again painfully as one of the 12.
accompanied by a large armed crowd, swords and clubs. The authorities are treating Jesus like some violent rebel leader.
Yeah, despite his consistent teaching against violence. And Judas, needing to make sure they grab the right person in the dark of the olive grove.
He provides a sign, a prearranged, deeply corrupted sign.
Matthew 26, verses 48 and 49. And the one who betrayed him had given them a sign, saying, "Whom I kiss, it is he himself. Seize him." And immediately he came to Jesus and said, "Greetings, Rabbi." And he intensely kissed him.
That intense kiss. It's a corruption of a greeting of devotion, isn't it? The ultimate act of hypocrisy. And notice again, Judas still calls him rabbi.
Never Lord. And Jesus' response just confirms his full knowledge, his voluntary acceptance of what's happening. Matthew 26.50. But Jesus said to him, "Friend, do what you are here for."
It sounds almost like a command. Jesus commanding the inevitable fulfillment, confirming he knows the plot, he's voluntarily surrendering.
That's often how it's interpreted. Then, at this exact moment, Peter, whose loyalties were just questioned, tries to prove his earlier boast.
He draws a weapon.
Right. Peter, completely misunderstanding the nature of Jesus' kingdom and his voluntary surrender, draws a sword, lashes out, strikes a servant of the high priest, cuts off his ear. Matthew 26.51.
And Jesus immediately stops the violence. This leads to one of his most critical statements about worldly power, doesn't it?
It does. What he says to Peter in Matthew 26.52 is a timeless principle. Then Jesus said to him, "Return your sword to its place, for the ones taking up the sword will die by the sword."
Violence begets violence.
Essentially, yes, he's reinforcing that his kingdom isn't established or defended through physical force, but through submission and spiritual authority.
He then explains that resistance is utterly pointless anyway. Why?
Because, despite having access to infinite power, he mentions he could call down 12 legions of angels. Scripture must be fulfilled. Matthew 26.54. How then would the scriptures be fulfilled that say it must occur in this manner?
The arrest has to happen to fulfill the prophecies about the suffering Messiah.
Exactly. And the immediate consequence for the disciples? Total collapse. Matthew 26.56 confirms the devastating result. But all this happened that the writings of the prophets might be fulfilled. Then all the disciples abandoned him and began to flee.
All those brave promises made just hours before in Gethsemane, empty. They all fled.
Their weakness exposed.
Jesus is then led away to the high priest Caiaphas. And the text makes it clear, this isn't a search for truth. It's a search for justification for execution. Matthew 26.59.
A predetermined outcome.
And Peter, having initially fled, now follows from a distance. Matthew 26.58. He places himself right in that vulnerable periphery of the action.
Right into the danger zone. The trial itself is a complete travesty. The council is desperately searching for false testimony, anything that could justify a death sentence under Roman law.
Matthew 26.59 to 61 details how hard that was. And the chief priests and the whole council were looking for false testimony against Jesus so they could put him to death. And they did not find many coming forward to testify falsely. But finally 2 came forward, saying, this one said, "I am able to destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days."
A garbled, misunderstood reference to his resurrection, but it's enough for Caiaphas to seize upon.
Right. Flustered by the unreliable witnesses, Caiaphas puts Jesus under the most solemn oath possible.
The high priest's question in Matthew 26.63 is the crucial one. "I put you under oath according to the living God. You tell us if you yourself are the Christ, the Son of God."
And Jesus gives this direct, affirmative, and profoundly prophetic answer. He confirms his identity and asserts his future authority.
Matthew 26.64. Jesus said to him, "You have said it. Nevertheless, I say to all of you, from now on you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven."
Referencing Daniel 7. Claiming he'll be the judge. That's massive. In their eyes, that's undeniable blasphemy.
That confession sealed his fate. Caiaphas rips his robes, a theatrical act signaling horror at blasphemy, and declares the verdict. Matthew 26.65-66. Then the high priest tore his clothing, saying, "He is blasphemed. Why yet do we have need of further witnesses? Behold, now you have heard the blasphemy. What you think?" And they answered, saying, "He is deserving of death."
So while Jesus endures this unlawful abuse and ridicule inside the hall, Matthew 26.67-68, just outside, in the courtyard, Peter's own prophecy is tragically unfolding.
His descent into denial is gradual, but it escalates quickly. Peter's trying to blend in with the servants, and he's first recognized by, ironically, the least powerful person there, a slave girl.
Talk about a spiritual test for the disciple who boasted he'd die for the Lord.
Absolutely. The first denial is tentative, almost a denial of understanding. Matthew 26.69-70. Now, Peter was sitting outside in the courtyard, and one of the slave girls came to him, saying, "You yourself were also with Jesus of Galilee." And he denied before all of them, saying, "I do not know what you are saying."
He then retreats towards the gateway, but he's immediately confronted again by another servant girl.
The pressure mounts. This forces the second denial, which is stronger. Matthew says he denies it with an oath this time, a direct lie under divine affirmation. Matthew 26.71-72. Then he went to the gateway where another servant girl saw him. She said to the ones there, "This man was with Jesus of Nazareth," and he denied it again with an oath, "I do not know the man."
And finally, the third time, it's the crowd. They notice his accent. His Galilean speech gives him away. This is where his panic completely takes over.
Leading to the third, most intense denial. Matthew 26.73-74. And after a little while, the ones standing around came to Peter and said, "Certainly you also are one of them, for your speech is making you evident." Then he began to curse and took an oath, "I do not know the man." Immediately the rooster crowed.
Immediately. The synchronization of the rooster crowing right then, it's the spiritual moment of truth, isn't it?
Yeah.
The physical fulfillment of Jesus' warning, cutting right through Peter's self-deception, his broken promises.
Matthew 26.75 captures that profound, immediate aftermath. Then Peter remembered the word Jesus had spoken, "Before the rooster crows, 3 times you will deny me." And he went outside and wept bitterly.
Wept bitterly. That bitter weeping, though, that's the key distinction between Peter and Judas, isn't it?
It really is. Judas despaired, retreated into himself, ultimately took his own life. Peter experienced genuine, heartfelt repentance. That brokenness paved the way for his eventual restoration.
So the practical takeaway here is maybe twofold. Realizing our deep-seated weakness is crucial, like Paul warns in 1 Corinthians 10.1. But also, failure, even catastrophic failure, when it's followed by genuine, heartfelt repentance. That's the path back.
It's a hard lesson, but a hopeful one.
Yeah.
Hashtag outro.
So if we try to synthesize the monumental teachings packed into Matthew chapter 26, it's just this powerful study in contrast, isn't it? Theological contrast, human contrast.
Absolutely. The chapter is framed by Jesus' absolute divine sovereignty, you see, his fixed schedule, his voluntary submission, and that's contrasted constantly with the depths of human wickedness.
Like the conspiracy of the leaders, the specific cheat betrayal by Judas.
Right. And running parallel to those big events are these intimate lessons on devotion and vigilance. You have the lavish, costly worship of the unnamed woman.
Set right against the disciples' collective fear and failure, especially Peter's triple denial, just hours after that ultimate boast.
And anchoring it all is the Lord's Supper, demanding both commemoration of the past sacrifice and anticipation of the future reunion in the kingdom.
It keeps coming back to that crucial, agonizing moment in Gethsemane, doesn't it? The source material really emphasizes that Jesus' death wasn't just necessary to fulfill prophecy.
But it was entirely voluntary, contingent upon his submission to the Father's plan, even as his soul was, as he said, afflicted to the point of death.
Which brings us, I think, to our final provocative thought from this deep dive.
Go for it.
If Jesus himself, facing that unimaginable spiritual torment, bearing the sin of the world, enduring the Father's wrath, he still found the strength to pray that ultimate prayer of submission.
Nevertheless, not as I myself will, but as you will, Matt 26.39.
Exactly. If he prayed that, what must that mandate look like for us? How should that profound submission shape our daily approach? our approach to overwhelming personal sorrows, to really difficult decisions, to those moments when our own weak will just rebels against what we know is the spiritual path.
It raises the bar considerably, doesn't it?
It does. The enduring challenge of Matthew 26 seems to be this persistent call. Submit our own frail will to the infallible divine will, even when the cup right in front of us looks utterly devastating.
The challenge indeed.
Well, we certainly encourage you to continue your own deep dive into these powerful and, let's be honest, deeply challenging narratives. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.